Hey, I'm Tobias, and the date is the 7th of October, I think, and I really can't believe that it's October already. Um, my hope was not to be in LA anymore by October, but that's a separate discussion for another time. Um, but basically, I'm about 2.5 weeks out from my 1 year anniversary of starting this process, and it's only in retrospect, really, that I've been able to appreciate how far I've come. Um, Within that, of course, I've talked about a little bit kind of overshooting and over emphasizing certain changes that I thought were happening, discovering that that's really not what those changes looked like because they then came later and I was like, oh, that's what this is. Um, and it has entailed a lot of unexpected hardships as well as unexpected positives. So I will probably do a more comprehensive retrospective later this month. But for now, I wanted to talk about where I've been because my last video was at 10 and a half months, and I feel like it's about that time. So here I am. Um, there are, as I mentioned, a couple of processes that have been just so gradual that I've only noticed them kind of more recently, like looking at myself in the mirror, listening to the sound of my voice, etc., versus living with myself every day. And of course, the changes being so incremental that it's hard to really notice them. So, the first big one is body fat redistribution. And it's an obvious one. They tell you it takes a lot of time, and that is true. But I have been really shocked to discover lately that my body does have much more of a straight profile. Um, and it's been kind of a trip. I wouldn't say that it gives me any particular positive or negative feelings. There are some other features, sorry, other features of my body that do give me a little bit more of feelings one way or another that kind of coincide with the fat redistribution. But as far as like my overall lines and profile of my body, I've achieved ambiguity. Yay! You are here. You have arrived. I've discovered that has been. I don't know if that's a major contributor to the way that people perceive me out in public. I will say that it's not something that I really like noticed until fairly recently. So there's that. Within body fat redistribution, there's also the fact that body fat has moved from, in particular, my breasts and a couple of other spots on my body to my gut. And that is the one change that has been a little bit, not even a little bit, it's been challenging for me. It has. Part of what happened there is that it took me 8 months living in LA to finally be able to afford a gym membership. So now I'm going back to the gym, only I've been making my bed for 8 months of being inactive. Now I gotta lie in that. And it has been frustrating. Um, that's its own kind of story, which I will delve into in a different portion. But basically, in the time that I was inactive, yes, my job is pretty active in barista, but mostly you're just standing and you're doing a lot of repetitive motions. There is some lifting, but only like a couple of times in a day and only like relatively lighter weights, I would say. So it's not like I work in construction or something like that where I should be consuming like 3,000 calories because I'm just going to burn through it all. And so as a result, I accumulated a lot more fat than I'm used to having because prior to my move, I was extremely active. I was athletic, between 4 and 6 times a week and doing some intense stuff. And it's been heartbreaking to have to start over. It's been humbling. As for my body proportions, though, there's this kind of frustration and despair almost about my body fat being where it is. And it's not even about like a number on a scale. Frankly, the number on the scale hasn't moved since probably like April. But just what that weight actually like looks like on my body right now versus what it looked like when I first moved here is a pretty big change. Um, it's been kind of ironic because the distribution of my body fat means that many clothes that maybe wouldn't fit me where I'm at now do, because I'm not carrying the fat in my hips, or I'm not carrying the fat in my top half anymore. Um, and so that's been a blessing and a curse. It means that I haven't had to go looking for a whole lot of new clothing, but there are some other things that, like for example, my shoulders have gotten broader. Um, and as a result, shirts that otherwise fit me fine, and maybe in the past the concern was that my boobs were too big. Now it doesn't fit across my shoulders. So we're getting into, they tell me, sweater weather in Los Angeles. I'll believe it when I see it, because fuck, it's been like 80 degrees, 79 degrees, and like toasty outside. But when it comes to sweater weather, you know, the vast majority of my cold weather clothes were A, femme, B, from a time before I had, you know, 8 months of changes. When I first moved here, I think I had like 3 months under my belt, and that was it. It's been a lot of change since then. I went up on my T dose and I switched to injectable, which I am told has more um, intense effects than the transdermal, which is the patch I was using before. And for sure, like all of that has cumulatively really shown a change. And that's just about body fat. I've spent 7 minutes more or less talking about how my body looks differently now in terms of construction. Another thing that's changed is hair. I don't know if my head hair has really changed all that much. Like, I'll have to go back and go through, like, my earlier timelines and stuff. Like, maybe I have some thinning up here. Um, it's fine. If anything, having slightly less hair up top means less work for me. Because my hair has been, like, an ongoing experiment of trying to figure out what it likes from maybe the time I was about 21 years old. And I'm just starting to really get a handle on what it likes, what it doesn't like. Body hair has been a big one. I do have a little bit of hair all across here now. A little bit around here, mostly on this side, which is really aggravating. A little bit under the chin, which doesn't grow very fast. One of the first hair changes I noticed is I actually have like a mole right here, and suddenly it started growing hair after I went up on T, like way back in, I don't know, May. And since then, it has brought in a few more hairs, and it's aggravating because it's like the hairs that come out of this guy are quite robust and thick, and these guys largely are still peach fuzz. I have like smatterings of slightly darker hair. The vast majority are like whiter than white blonde. Can't see them. I've even fantasized about trying like mascara on them to see how they would stand out. I'll post pictures if I do. Wish me luck. And my legs have a ton more hair. I have hair on my butt. I have hair in my butt. It's the thing. And the hair that was previously on my legs was only mostly like distributed on the front of the calf. Now it's a little bit on the back of the calf, all on the tops of my thighs now, and on my butte, as I mentioned. And my happy trail finally started coming in gradually. It goes from like maybe just below my diaphragm downwards, but doesn't connect yet to down below. So that's a change that I'm wondering if it'll happen. Maybe it won't. So many of these things that have changed for me, it occurs to me I didn't quite know like what to expect to happen. Part of that is just by virtue of puberty being a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get quite, but also I didn't know what certain specific like physical features really looked like. So it didn't occur to me what chest hair looks like. It didn't occur to me what pubic hair like slash what do you call this? The happy trail like would actually look like as it grew in. Like I just assumed the two would connect. Apparently that's not a thing necessarily. Not everybody gets a happy trail, etc. But I will say that I really quite like my body hair, which has been very surprising for me. It's not something I ever gave a whole lot of thought before, but now I quite like it. Um, my voice has been a big one lately. I used to complain and bitch and moan. I was like, when is my voice gonna start changing? I want to see like what a voice crack sounds like. Well, friends, it did happen. It happened while I was trying to help a customer out at work. And that was one of those changes that I had no idea what I was really signing myself up for because I would have little like blips in my voice now and again. I was like, oh, that must be a voice crack. No, no, that's not what a voice crack is. A voice crack means that I'm trying to tell a customer that it sounds like their day is going awesome, but instead of saying awesome, I come out sounding like a honking fucking goose. In like a slightly higher pitch, typically very loud volume. And I wasn't really apprised as to whether like the loud volume is a characteristic of voice cracks, but it does seem to be a characteristic of mine. Um, Within that, it's interesting because I do crack sometimes on some high notes. When I'm singing, though, it looks a lot different. Mostly, it just looks like certain notes are not happening anymore. My voice just kind of cuts out. And sometimes there's this like kind of phlegmy feeling, like if I were to just clear my throat enough, I would be able to hit that note. Um, some of the other ones, it's just and one thing that I was made aware of is that changes day by day. You know, your voice is a living, breathing instrument, quite literally, and so from day to day it changes. Some days you're more relaxed, your voice works with you more effectively. Some days you decided you needed to smoke 5 cigarettes before work in the morning. I don't smoke cigarettes, but for example, and then maybe your voice is like, and that's just what it's decided to do. Um, Within singing, I've lost some high notes, as I've mentioned. I've also gained a couple of low notes, and it's been really fun because many of these changes have come in the time since I really stopped paying attention to looking for and micro-analyzing each and every one. And basically, I just decided to pick up my guitar a couple weeks ago, maybe after my last video, and just start playing. And I've discovered I have this beautiful, like, middle range kind of vocal range, for lack of a less redundant term. I can't necessarily sing, like, the high notes that I could before. There are some lower register female singers, who now I can sing along with some portions of their songs that I couldn't before. So like people like Adele or Katy Perry. I think Katie Tunstall also has a slightly lower voice. There are also some notes of like male singers singing that or singing certain songs that now I can hit, whereas previously I couldn't. It has forced me, exploring my range has forced me to have good technique, because if I do not have good technique in like making sure that I'm breathing, for example, then it just doesn't come. I would say the effort to sing, period, has increased a lot, which I'm okay with. It's been an interesting exploration process, and I'd rather not, injure myself while I'm doing it. I mentioned body fat redistribution. Something that has changed is muscle mass. And it's been interesting because, like, my shoulders are clearly broader. This isn't necessarily all fat pack. On the other hand, one thing that's been odd is I haven't noticed necessarily that an increase of muscle mass has correlated to strength or an increase of strength. To the contrary, I mean, I mentioned that I was inactive for 8 months. And so really, all of my efforts in working out have been kind of trying to come back from that. a couple of previous times that I'd made an effort to become active again, I like got really odd injuries and had to stop and rest, and like months went on and I couldn't exercise again. But so it was interesting. I lost my hollow body hold, which was devastating, but now I have it back. However, I still had a couple of push-ups, but my stamina in push-ups sucks a dick right now. It's something that I'm working on, and basically a lot of becoming reacquainted with my muscles and what they can do, what they not look like, has come with an appreciation for just how much work I did previously to get to where I was. And in fact, if I'd been training from January, even if it were just like once a week, I would probably be in a much different boat physically than I am now. So, made my bed for 8 months, now I gotta lie in it. Sucks, but there you go. You can definitely see more muscle than before. Like, it took me a long time to get any kind of tricep definition now, or like bicep definition. Like, I didn't really have this before. Now I do. As I mentioned, it hasn't necessarily correlated with any kind of performance increase. It's just a different aspect of my body makeup, I guess, than the way it was before. The muscles are more obvious, and I know that to an extent that's also due to body fat change. So I've had some fat probably move from around here, the dreaded chicken wings or whatever, to my gut. There you go. It happens. And to sort of glom onto that, I mentioned that there have been some changes to my boobs. Well, I've mentioned in previous videos that I was considering top surgery as an option because there are certain things that I have really admired and like wanted about having a flatter chest. Not necessarily to make these go away entirely, but maybe to make them look a little bit more like pecs that stand out, for example. Well, it turns out that in the process of body fat redistribution, I think that I've also had some autophagy here. That means basically the body is consuming tissue it doesn't use anymore and reusing it basically for other stuff. And it's just going to my gut, unclear at this time. But what that means is that not only has the amount of tissue in my boobs, like fat tissue inside, decreased, but also they don't look the way that they used to look. The whole thing has kind of gotten smaller on both sides, and I think that's a process that's ongoing. So I'm pretty glad that I was not able to or wanting to like full speed ahead like I did with my name change and just go under the knife basically, because it's clear that my body is still changing and figuring itself out, and if I do work out and I create some muscle mass under here, who knows, maybe I will not need surgery to feel good about my body and to feel comfortable going around without a shirt. That's another thing. One of the things that used to draw me about top surgery and frustrate me about my breasts is that the way that they would hang down and they were much larger in the amount of tissue that was in there. Lol. It was physically uncomfortable to go around without some sort of a bra or like a top, because they would just like kind of hang really heavy on my chest. And then before I knew it, I had like a puddle of sweat underneath them, like running down my stomach. It was a bad time. But in the past month or two, I've noticed that that doesn't really happen as much. My hope is that as my chest continues to change, either I won't need surgery at all, or if and when I do have surgery, it'll be more like a radical reduction. It'll be more like removing excess skin rather than needing to worry about whether or not my top surgeon can do one of the techniques that allows me to keep my nipples connected to the rest of me, because I'm desperately interested in avoiding grafts if possible. So that's my life story, and I'm sticking to it. There have been a couple of social changes as well. Way back in, I want to say like June-ish, was when I was transferred from the store I was previously working at as barista to the new one that, sorry, my computer just fell asleep here. There we go. To the new one that I was destined to go to this whole time. And I got misgendered like hell. That first day, I was part of the team that was physically constructing the inside of the store. And I just got she heard everywhere constantly, and it was very upsetting. Um, Especially because I have often had trouble asking for what I need in general, even from people that I love very much and trust a lot. Let alone 30 perfect strangers that I had met one other time. And now I was confronted with the choice of maybe having to come out individually to all of these people in order to not have my heart like assaulted every day I went into work. Well, that day, as mostly an act of defiance, I went into the men's room when I had to be. And ever since then, I have pretty much used their men's room exclusively. Um, I've mentioned in the past that I'm getting gendered about 50-50, male or female, which, of course, as we know, isn't quite right either. But there you go. I'm getting both sides of the aisle. And so it's been something that I'm confronting, especially as I mentioned, I now have a gym membership of worrying about how people may react to me in women's spaces or in men's spaces. So like I have the benefit of only being 5'6". Like for example, the model Rain Dove is like 6 feet tall. So if somebody thinks that I look masculine, like it's more likely that I'll be taken as like maybe a butch lesbian or something like that if I'm seen in a women's room. On the other hand, like Rain got fucking pepper sprayed one time for peeing in a women's room while being non-binary and androgynous to masculine like presenting. And that sort of thing terrifies me. Like I hate making anyone uncomfortable. I realize that that's to an extent not within my control, but I also am an advocate of not dying and of self-preservation. And so it's kind of like, well, if I go into the men's room, how much shit am I going to get? If I go into the women's room, how much shit am I going to get? And with a bathroom, it's a little easier because I can just disappear into a stall, quickly do what I need to do, and fuck off. But if I'm in a locker room, then maybe I'm changing in there. I'm in there for like a more prolonged period of time. And in particular, if I like want to shower myself, then that's the whole thing I got to worry about. As I mentioned, I am non-op, and so that means that like if I'm naked in a women's room, they can clearly see that I have boobs, even if the rest of me is kind of ambiguous, and I'm likely to be welcomed into the tribe, so to speak, even if I don't want that. In the men's room, I lack certain anatomical features that might stand out, and also I do still have like I don't know if they could even pass as moobs really at this point. Maybe in the future. And so I actually have opted a couple of times when it's just here's what happens. When it's just me, typically I use the men's simply because I don't want to deal with people thinking there's a fucking man in the women's locker room. But if my partner is with me, then I'll go into the women's. And typically the two of us together get taken as women, which, whatever, you know, as long as I'm safe, then I'm willing to settle for now. But when I have used the men's locker room, there have been a couple of times that I have showered. It's turned out fine. And a funny difference between the women's locker room and the men's is that in the women's locker room, many people are often naked, which weirded me out the first time I saw it, but now I just kind of accept and know that it's a thing for women's locker rooms. In men's locker rooms, pretty much no one's naked at any time. And I've basically been treating it like the men's room. There are certain like rules of etiquette in a men's room. Like, for example, don't look at anyone ever, which works beautifully for me. Because if people are avoiding looking at me, then they don't notice that maybe I don't have all of the physical features that they're looking for in an adult guy. But related to that, I think, is this thing about how nobody is naked in the locker room. And I've continued to follow that rule of just don't look at anyone in the locker room, and it's worked out fine for me so far. Knock on wood. Um, but it's not something I ever thought about before, really. And I would say that it kind of started becoming more of a concern, how I would be perceived in women's spaces in particular, in the past couple of months, as I have been taken as a guy more frequently. Um, Imperfect answers to weird problems, I guess. Um, Relatedly, I am getting misgendered on both sides of the binary still, and I think in the past I was still deciding how I felt about that. I have decided that it is more comfortable to be misgendered as a guy simply because it's true that men get treated better, just by and large, by people out in the world, in particular other men, but everyone. I'm less likely to get attitude from customers if they think I'm a guy. Guys tend to feel a sense of like camaraderie and like brotherhood, for lack of a better term, if they think that I'm a guy. Certain kinds of men in particular, that's true for. Um, on the other hand, I'm also not a guy, and that has created some tension in my life in certain ways. So, like, when I'm walking around with my partner and people think I'm a dude, then we get read as a straight couple, which of course couldn't be farther from the truth. Um, Conversely, when I'm read as a woman, that is the original hurtful thing that I was kind of running away from. And so it really sucks. It's taken some work to try and move past that. What am I failing at in my presentation that you think I'm a woman? Because I am gender fluid. Like my sense of self and my centeredness towards one gender binary or another is constantly fluctuating. And so it's like, on the one hand, it sucks because of the legacy of that, of being misgendered constantly that way growing up. On the other hand, it's also true that I know who I am. And so it's like I've been making an effort to let go a little bit more when people read me as a woman. Um, I think that in particular because of the history and also the gender expectations that are placed on women conventionally, I very much more shy away from that invited sisterhood that can come from women, especially moms. Um, I love kids, they're beautiful, but there are some features of the expected life of a mother that I'm just not willing to abide. Um, Between the two, there are some titles that I've discovered that I like a lot more than others. So I've discovered that I really like certain masculine titles, masculine. So I had a customer who came in today and yesterday, and he calls me brother. And that gives me warm fuzzies somehow on the inside. I like being called brother. And buddy is another fun one. Dude. Bro is still a little weird for me, but I would rather bro than sis, I think, at this point. I'm trying to think of like other gendered terms. I like being sirred. I really don't like being called miss. Um, for a few reasons, mostly pertaining to that, again, just trying to escape that legacy of being called female forever. Um, but it's been kind of a fun mix and a fun experiment, seeing the ways that people interact with me when they think I'm a man versus when they think I'm a woman. And in a perfect world, obviously, they would read the fucking pin on my apron, which is prominently displayed below my name, and they would go, oh, I should use they, them pronouns. Maybe this person is non-binary. Maybe this person, like, isn't in my secret sisterhood club of shared women's experiences fully, or whatever. But sadly, I've had, like, 2 people total compliment me on my pin, and the vast majority of other people who are not my coworkers, like 99.9% of them, do call me a either he, him, or she, her. And so that's just kind of a thing. It's part of why I'm trying to learn to let go a little bit. It's like I see so many people in a day, like I put myself out there by having this pin on my apron, but it's also not my job to explicitly explain myself to you every time that you come in, or every time that one of the hundreds of people like you come through my drive-through during peak hour when I'm on shift, you know? Um, but by and large, takeaways include I like masculine titles better and men get treated better in society, which it's one thing to know that in theory. It's a completely weird thing to experience it in practice. I will say that. Um, that is one of the things that like I worry about though. I mentioned I love kids, and so like I would hate to have women suddenly be very much like on their guard if I'm like talking to their kid or something like that. If their like kid is at the park and holding a fire truck and like looking at me, like, can I engage them about that? Or is the mom figure gonna perceive me as dangerous? All 5, 6 and a half of me, mind you, but there you go. Some other developments include my an increasing number of my family members now call me Tobias, which is wonderful. The only people that I see on a regular basis who do not call me by my name are my adoptive mom, my adoptive dad, and my stepmom. Everybody else that I've seen so far calls me Toby now. And they made the transition like that. It was a non-issue. I was petrified to bring it up the first time until I was like, you know what? Fuck it. You know, I owe it to myself to be able to be who I am with my own family. And so I figured that my aunts and my uncles and my cousins were relatively safe people to share it with. So that's what I did. And so far so good. It's been great. Yeah. And on a final note, I guess related to that is concerning basically personal issues that they they warn you in the beginning will not be changed by HRT, and then come to find out a year and a half later, or a year later, nearly, that that's half true. Basically, just personal attributes and personal like insecurities and frustrations. Um, it took going on testosterone for me to discover that I get angry. I swear to God. I am 26. I have been on T for the better part of age 26. And only in that time have I felt anger and been like, this is anger. This is good. I need this. Um, I suffer with codependency a lot. And so in a lot of my early life, there was a lot of like people pleasing, a lot of self-denial of like my own needs, a lot of being gaslit that my needs were unreasonable or inappropriate. And, you know, a lot of anguish. Definitely there were times that I lashed out, and in retrospect, I can see that what I was feeling is anger. But I would not necessarily have put those words to it at the time. And in particular, like probably after age of 16, there are unfortunately some instances that I can look back and like see that I raged at people in my life who were close to me when I was upset. But anger is kind of its own unique feeling, and I really value it as a messenger that something is wrong and that something needs to change. Often I feel angry when there is a need of mine that isn't being met, or which is being trampled on. And that's been so, so important. I think, or I know, for a lot of my life, I was petrified of anger for the reason that one of my biological parents, my dad, specifically his anger is a huge component of why I was adopted out because he is violently angry. Um, and I've learned that I don't have to be. I can be angry and be fine, frankly. Being angry is a necessary reaction to some features of life, I think. And so I will say that going on tea really freed me in that way. On the other hand, and it did give me a certain amount of personal confidence, I definitely walk with a bit more of a swagger when I'm presenting hard mask. But, the underlying codependency issues are still there. And I fight those every single day. The people pleasing, the believing other people's narratives about me, the questioning my own truths on things, etc., etc. And I'm taking steps to address that, but that is for sure something that has not been cured by HRT. And I don't think it's reasonable to have expected that that would change with HRT. You know what I mean? But with, the empowerment that being angry gives me and the empowerment that just being more openly and authentically who I am in the universe gives me, it's getting better with time. I'm connecting the dots in my history as to why I'm here and why I am the way I am. And I'm able to think about steps that I can take to move forward with that. This is a tremendously long video. It's gone over 36 minutes. I'll probably split it into two. But that's my nearly 1 year update. Thank you so much for sticking around. And as an outro, I signed up to ride with AIDS Life Cycle, which is a charity ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles. But I need to fundraise for the organization in order to ride. Basically, what AIDS Life Cycle does is it promotes visibility, advocacy, outreach, and financing efforts towards offering HIV/AIDS treatment, research, and counseling in San Francisco as well as LA. That's where the two organizations that are the beneficiaries are. But their work has improved the lives of people nationally and globally. So if you'd be willing to join me in my the self-flagellation that is signing myself up to ride 545 miles on a bike, I would love to have any kind of financial support, or if you can, just spread the word, because if I accumulate enough people who give me basically the price for a cup of coffee in the morning, then I can go on this ride and I can contribute to an amazing cause while I'm at it. So please think about it. Thank you for sticking around with me, and I will try to be here on my birthday. Not my 27th birthday, but my tea birthday. Thanks for watching, and be kind to each other.